We are here with John and Nichole Sablan to talk about parenting. And just a few of the areas we're going to cover today are how to raise teenagers. We know so many teenagers resist the faith, so we're going to address that. What to do to motivate them to not be resistant and really allow the Holy Spirit to work through them. How to bring them to church. We know that can be a challenge, and much more. John and Nichole are a great witness, and they have raised several kids on their own, but Nichole has a unique profession that will help enlighten us here. Nichole, would you mind sharing that?
Sure. So I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. And so I've been also a school psychologist, been practicing that for 16 years.
Yeah, and I think as a school psychologist, right, she's dealt with many families, many students, many kids through all different ages, and quite honestly, has dealt with a lot of drama.
Yes, I'm sure many people watching have had drama with their own kids. So, Nichole, how do you lovingly care and raise resisting teenagers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I think that we have to understand that in that developmental period during their teenage years, they're going through a natural stage of development where they are becoming their own, trying to come to their own. So they may resist authority. Parents, unfortunately, are looked at as authoritarian figures. And so they're trying to develop who they are and their own identity. So naturally, they're going to kind of push away and question. And they're also naturally drawn to their friends and what their friends are doing and that getting that sense of belonging from them. So I think that one thing is to consider that, because I think if you understand that it is a natural part of development, then you're less inclined to take it personally. And as a parent, it's really important, because if I understand it's a natural part of development as opposed to they're just resisting me, then I'm going to approach it quite differently, perhaps with more compassion and understanding.
John and Nichole have so much wisdom to share, so make sure you subscribe to their channel. They cover incredible content. So we all know that not taking things personal is easier said than done. Yeah. Do you guys have any practical ways to apply this in your life?
Yeah, I would say this for me it is easier said than done, because I'm a person that takes a lot of things personal. It was a big challenge, and I'm still working on that. I'm a work in progress. But I actually came up with an acronym that I think would help us just as we try to deal with raising our kids, especially during these more challenging times when they are resisting and seem like they're rebelling, right? Because it can seem like at times like, what are my kids, Satan's spawn, right? It's like, for one, you're not the only one going through this. As Nichole mentioned, it's a natural stage of development. And so when you try to understand that objectively speaking, then you try to step back and say, okay, this is not personally an attack against me. This is part of the development. But the acronym I came up for was to whip your kids into shape. Whip, WHIP, right? So how do we whip our kids into shape when we're dealing with all these struggles and the daily life of just parenting and family life? That W is probably the most important part of it. And I think actually more so for the husbands and fathers than it is for the wives. And we can talk about that as far as data is concerned, but it's witness, right? Are we witnessing to the faith that we expect them to live? Are we witnessing to the virtues and to the holiness that we expect these kids to live? Or are we the least patient in our home? Are we the ones that are, the least engaged in the faith? And I think this is a problem more so for the men. It was for a long time with me, as we talked about in a previous discussion, right? Was just the struggle it is to witness to exactly what you hope your kids to aspire to be drawn to. So that's the W, is the witness. Are you actually demonstrating those behaviors? The H is hear them out. Right? What are the struggles? How many times you say, I don't want to pray the rosary, right? Well, why not? Why do you think we pray the rosary? What are you struggling against? Well, I want to play video games, right? And, or maybe they're arguing with you about, why do I only get an hour of playing video games, right? Everybody else in the block at school, they can play as long as they want. And so you hear them out and you listen to what they are. So they felt like they're being heard. They're able to articulate, right? They can explain with their words what their problem is with going to church, with praying, with hanging out with the family, with being on their devices, whatever it may be. So that's the H, hear them out, give them a voice. Right? Because sometimes they feel like they don't have one.
And it almost creates like an opportunity to talk about the topic, the subject.
Yeah. Rather than dealing, right? When they're having their little tantrum, right? And we can all do this, right? Even as adults, we have tantrum sometimes. But it's like when the reaction, what did you tell me, babe? Because you'll say when the reaction or the response to the whatever the situation is, when it's completely abnormal, right? Like they're blowing up. You're like, I just asked you to come over here and pray, right? Why are you losing your mind, right? And you have trouble through the house. And it's like, well, there's something else going on. What is it? But if you don't ask the question of like, why is the struggle? Why are you fighting with going to mass? You know, we go to mass every Sunday. We're practicing Catholics. Why are we struggling with that? You allow them because maybe they have some issue, right? Maybe there's a person at the youth group, right? That makes fun of them every time that they're there. You don't know. So hear them out. Give them the voice. Right? It gives an opportunity. The I is actually twofold. It's instruct and inform, right? This is where we provide the why. So important, right? Most Catholics maybe know what they do. What we do with Catholics, many don't know why we do it. And this is, so you don't know why you do it. You don't know why we go to mass. We don't know why do we have to pray this rosary? It's so repetitive. It's so boring. It's so blah, right? There's all of these things that we have that we have an opportunity to instruct and inform them. Well, this is why we value God in our home. This is why we go to mass. This is why we practice piety and reverence when we approach receiving Holy Communion. All of those things provide a why. So even if the kids don't necessarily agree, they can at least better understand. And right. And so, you think about St. Augustine, right? I seek to believe, but first and to better understand, right? So increase my faith. And then the P is twofold as well, as exhibit patience, right? And understand that God doesn't, he's a gentleman. He respects our free will and our choice. So we also have to respect the freedom and the choice that our kids are making, but you also need to parent, right? So be patient, but parent. There's a lot of people we run into in ministry and the different walks of life, in family life, and the work that we do both in the church and in obviously Nichole as counseling will make an excuse. Well, I don't want to force the faith on my children. Right? I don't want to force them to do it. This is, I want them to come into their own. And it would be, and I would always ask, well, do you do that in any other area of their life? If they woke up to today and they said, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm tired. I'm done with the school thing. It's not for me. You're like, you're in 7th grade. What are you talking about? Right? Like, no, I'm done. You wouldn't say, well, I don't want to force school on you. No, you'd say, get your butt up and get dressed. And you got 10 minutes. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Right? You wouldn't say that if they said, well, I don't want to show up. I don't want to go to soccer practice anymore. What do you mean? I go to soccer practice. Or I don't want to go today. Right? You wouldn't do it with that. You wouldn't do it with the chores. You know what? You're right. You don't want to do chores anymore. You're right. We don't need to do that. What am I asking you? That's silly, right? No, you would tell them and force them to do those, or at least you would discipline them accordingly. So I think, we do that always with the exception of God and faith. And I think if we're going to get our arms around raising our kids and keeping them Catholic, we have to kind of exhibit it though. So hopefully that was helpful, right? Whip them into shape, witness, hear them out, instruct and inform, and demonstrate patience, but also be a parent. You're not there to be their friend. You're not there to be their buddy. You're there to parent them, and you are their primary formers and educators in the faith and the school of love and of virtues as well.
But I think you are there to be connected to them emotionally. They need to feel that they're supported emotionally. In order to do that, we used to take our kids out to just having some sort of date. So individual dates, just one-on-one. So for instance, I would have maybe my younger son and myself, we would go out to, someplace to eat a hamburger. And it was a alone time where he felt like not only what he heard, but he can share certain things that he couldn't share with the family because he's competing maybe with his siblings, with all of us, and all the different dynamics. So now he has alone time and then complete 100% my attention. I'm sitting there present to him. And that just allows for him to share all of the little things. Like, for instance, if he was being maybe teased by somebody or felt uncomfortable about certain things, or perhaps for our youngest son, a real example was his friend group were questioning some of our Catholic beliefs, and he didn't know how to respond to them. Well, those types of issues would emerge during this one-on-one time, as opposed to when everyone else is in the house, it may not come up. So I found that having those alone times were really beneficial. I would say that if you struggle with your children, particularly with boys, with my daughter, she is just like so easily, she just shares information. It's like TMI, but with the boys, it's a lot more difficult. but I'll share one tip in order to get them more to engage in, feelings, how things are going, more intimate things, is not to provide or require eye contact. So typically what I did is I would do some sort of passive activity. So if I was going to engage the boys, it was when I was cooking, when I was driving.
It's amazing.
Things like that. It wasn't that I sat face to face. Now, did we get to that point? Yes. But initially, it's really uncomfortable. And I have to say for my daughter as well, it was really uncomfortable to get into those conversations. It quite easier. I mean, it was easy for my daughter to adapt than my boys, but I would say that that was a trick, is just to not have that sort of require that direct eye contact.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Wow, that is amazing. Gosh, that is so good.
It is.
So it's funny, you mentioned like the one-on-one time. Something my dad has done is gone on like daddy-daughter dates. And I see the fruit of that. You know, I meet so many people that are from large families or whatnot. And most people from large families love being part of large families or whatever family size.
Yeah.
But you hear like people that never had a relationship with their parent. And those are often the people that I find leaving their faith, no matter what their faith was. You know, they didn't have a good relationship with one of their parents or either of their, both, and building that is so critical, because it's just like the faith. Like if we know who Jesus is, it changes everything. We can trust in him because we know who he is.
Yeah.
You know, we spend time with him. We trust him. He's just, he's a person, and we oftentimes think of like being a parent as something so different, but
and people, Dominic and Michael, they're 20 months old, and everyone's like, time flies. It's a blink, and it is a blink, and it's in those day to day, those sometimes hard days, sometimes easy days, but it's in the day to day that you're fostering, that you're creating those roots, and that's when it is so important to take that time to get to know and create that relationship with each child in your life.
Yes. So
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, and not to have, this amazing expectation from it, because sometimes it's not super fruitful.
Yes.
You're planting seeds. And I love, Ray, that you said, it's about having that, just like our relationship with the Lord. We can't love someone we don't know. We have to get to know one another. And then once we get to know, we start to love that person, then we can talk about the rules of engagement, right? You wouldn't start off with just the rules necessarily, because people are kind of like turned off by that.
Yes.
Really engage the person, and then you can kind of talk about those rules, and then they're more trusting in the why behind that. But it reminds me, there's times where my daughter was upset, and she'd had a hard day at school, and she would go in her room, and so I would knock on the door, Mom, I don't want to talk. And so I lay on her bed and I said, it's okay, I'm here, and when you're ready, I'll just be here.
That's awesome.
And so she knew that after a while, Mom's not going anywhere. She's present. She cares. And then she would end up talking to me. Now there's things that, like I said, I've heard things like, I don't want to talk, Mom, please. I want to be alone. And I understand, sweetheart, but when you're ready, I'm going to be here. And what I wanted to do is really show her that I want to listen, that you're having a difficult time, and I want to be there. Sort of like being the Simon of Cyrene. I'm willing to help you carry your cross. We all need that at times.
Without words too, right? That you're willing to actually step into whatever that pit they're in and just sit in it with them. And oftentimes, I'm an extrovert, and my temperament will, I'll just start talking and hope something comes out, right?
Yes.
And I can go on rambling, but sometimes it's even more important that your presence, it's felt. Right? Not just made in the sense of whatever you're vocalizing, but I think that's important with the kids. But you guys hit on something in all of this dialogue, which if we were to kind of give some of these nuggets for those that are listening about raising their kids, is really trust and relationship. And then these examples where we do daddy-daughter dates, or, mother-son dates, and we would do the same, right? So we would have, I'd have father-daughter dates and father-son dates, and we would just use it as a time to build that relationship, and therefore that trust. We're spending time with the ones who we say we love. We're getting to know how their day went, what's on their heart. Even for us as parents, even if we think it's something trivial, right? And we're thinking, this is an 11-year-old problem. Yeah, it's an 11-year-old problem. It's the biggest thing in their world today. So don't dismiss it, don't trivialize it, and realize that it's a big deal to them, right? And Nicole taught me this, thanks be to God, for our wives, to be able to kind of sit with it, because I would just be like, man, throw some dirt on it, move on, right? What are we doing? But the moms and your intuition and that nurturing side of you come out and say, no, this is a big deal to our child. So the minute that you, I think about this in the context of like when we talk about doing retreats, and I'll do confirmation retreats. And so if your kid's super excited, and this is where I see it when you have kids who get a fire lit in their hearts for God and the church, and then you have a non-practicing or a kind of a lukewarm family, they get on fire. They'll be at one of our retreats and they'll be like, well, I'm ready to go. And they jump in that car and they're ready to share with you, here's everything I did this last weekend. And the parents are like, shh, the game's on, right? Tell your mom later, mom will care, right? That's a first and the last time that child will probably bring up anything about the faith, right? There's no trust. He's like, the thing that I was going to share with you isn't important because, X is playing. So I think trust and relationships important. And Ray, you hit it on the head with, it's how much more so with our Lord, right? This is when we think about Dominic and Michael going through whatever tantrum they're going through at 20 months, it's like, well, here's the consequence of original sin. Welcome to the fallen world, right? People were rebelling from the beginning, Adam and Eve, right? Didn't trust. They were duped into not trusting in God's divine love, protection, and providence in their lives. And so here we are as people, human, fallen folks, trying to do the same thing. And our kids are going through this, right? And it's, if they trust and have a relationship with their parents, even if they disagree, even if they don't understand, they're still going to take your hand and walk with you because they trust that wherever you're taken to them isn't going to, be bad or be ill-willed or ill intent, right? So that's how much with our Lord as Catholics, as Christians, what do? We embrace the cross. I don't understand why I'm going through this strife. I don't understand why I'm going through this suffering, but Lord, I trust in you, so I'll walk with you. I'll take your hand wherever you want to lead me. And so much as well for us as parents, that if our kids trust in our love, and that we wouldn't lead them astray, then they're willing to walk even to places they don't want to go. Right? And I think that's the part where we also have to understand as parents, that how do we not take it personal, is realize that you need to be a parent, you need to lead them towards the truth, towards holiness, towards a virtue, even when you got to kind of drag them sometimes, even when they seem unwilling or they just don't get it because they're caught up in their world, right? Their 12-year-old world or their 14-year-old world or their 8-year-old world, where quite honestly, the tsunami of the culture is really trying to engulf them, right? The devil's winning that game when it comes to the social media aspect of it all. So we have to also see our children that they mean to do well, even if they're acting as if they're not.
So really that hones in on, how do you raise your kids in that way that they don't resist? You whip them into shape. Most importantly, the witnessing aspect of it. And I think that's really what's lacking the most. I mean, that's the hardest thing, to actually live out your faith in like your day to day. So many people are like, oh my gosh, my kids are so crazy, and it's like, well, do you witness the love of Christ to them? Do you witness the love in your marriage? And the impact that'll have. Many of you may not know this, but John had a very interesting life, and their marriage went through many hard times. It wasn't till your youngest was like 11 years old that you actually started practicing the faith. So that was, it was really hard to impact the kids. And we did a video, together, so you can see his sons. They talk about it. It was really awesome. But, maybe you're watching this and you're like, oh my goodness, my kid's 17 years old, or, how do I right the wrongs? And I think that consistent witness, that's what we really talked about. That is what's going to bring him back, because it's very similar to Paul.
Yeah. And it's all in God's time. It just shows right there.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I deal with this a lot in ministry as well. And especially, I heard this a lot in men's ministry, right? Because there may be some people out there that are watching that their kids are grown up, they're adults, they have families of their own now. Maybe you're a grandparent now, maybe you're older in age. And there's always what can I do now? They're not even in my home. And I'm like, well, did you stop being a parent because they're not in your home? Right? Because I mean, you can attest to this. How many people, we hear it even in ministry, how many people who are 65 years old, 75 years old will still go back to the time their father or their mother hurt them at 10,
Yeah.
at 6. They're still wearing that pain, that hurt, that disappointment of a fallen away father, or, you know, a fractured family. And so I always try to tell people in those cases who feel like it's hopeless for them, they can't turn around, is why not have an honest conversation with your children? Own it. Right? No different. Even when I came back to faith, is, you know I haven't been the best example as a father, as a husband, as a man of God, and I'm sorry for that. Will you forgive me? Right? Humble yourself and take accountability. So whether or not that you do that when you're 40 or, you know, 80, that will kind of shift, right? Because now they see you in all humility and docility before them, begging for that forgiveness, asking for that forgiveness, taking for that responsibility for whatever failures you had, whether it be as a parent or whether it be as a spouse or whatever it may be. So just
That's
kind
awesome.
of, yeah, you know, just kind of owning it. So
Yeah.
I don't think we get a free pass out of it to be like, well, they're out of the house now, so, you know, I'll pray for them. Right? I'll put a mass set in their name.
Yeah.
But too, but why not pick up the phone? Why not take them out to dinner or to lunch and just say, you know, it's been on my heart lately, but I've had this conversion to God, and I'm sorry I never really witnessed that in your lifetime, and I'm hoping that we can change that, you know. And so I hope that you'll allow me to work on improving that. Just put yourself out for God.
And that I'm sorry can be so hard. And so praying for humility, praying for virtue, because man, I know like swallowing pride can be really difficult, but it is so worth it in the end. It's like you can't grow without growing pains.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Probably I'm sorry is one of the like hardest things to utter,
Ew,
you know?
Yes.
So
it's something I work on daily.
But I would say it's probably two of the most important words that our children need to hear if we have done something that really hurt them. And the other piece I would say is not just the words, but it's backing it up with our actions and being consistent with it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's important. And I think it speaks to the witness that we're talking about.
You know, what's behind John and Nicole are saints. Saints are consistent.
Yes.
You have to be consistent. We all know those people that were on fire for the faith and now they're not practicing the faith. Or we all know those marriages that were like amazing and then they fell apart. I tell you, this is totally unrelated, but it breaks my heart to see how many Hollywood marriages there are that fall apart in, you know, a matter of months. It's just so sad, you know, the impact of beautiful marriages, like what that could have. And it is also really affirming to see like some actors that do have marriages that, you know, they've been married for 20 years and they're, you know, it's really cool to see that.
Strong.
So it shows the virtue that they possess. So Nicole, I want to ask you before we wrap up on the topic, how to raise your kids, you know, with a fire for the faith. Is there anything that you have that you've seen from your experience that's been helpful?
I would say, just being very open, since we do have that, building that relationship with my kids, being open on how the Lord has worked in my life personally, sharing that, you know, and when they were smaller, I would say too, after Mass, I would ask what resonated with you, one thing that resonated with you. And I was consistent with that. So they always knew to listen. They were going to have to listen in Mass because Mom's going to ask me after. And then sharing that, you know, how did God work in your life? How did he work in my life? And having that sort of dialogue so that we could be more attuned to God. What happened as time progressed is naturally, it started with my daughter. She had said, Mom, you know, she thought that everybody was practicing Christian. And then she goes off to, you know, college and a professor had asked, can you raise your hand if your parents are this or that? And so she was amazed. And that's when she saw there's differences between our family and other families, and really appreciated some of the differences was, well, we're practicing Catholics and what the Lord has done in our life. And so she gained, I think, a greater appreciation for the faith. And then what happened with, you know, with our son, our older son, and with Meeks as well. And he got to compare, you know, the family dynamics and what's different about those family dynamics and what's from ours, and saying, if I had to choose, I want to choose this one. And then with also that, I think the why is taking certain aspects of differences in perhaps belief systems and taken them to their natural consequences and or conclusions. And my son said, I don't want that. So how do we avoid that? But it's fostering that dialogue and making those connections, I think.
Wonderful.
I love that. It's like finding that opportunity. So for you after mass, asking that question again, showing that you care about what they think and what they got from the mass.
Yeah. So while we're
That's
on
great.
that topic, we all know that there are Sundays where your kids are like, I'm not going to church,
Yeah.
and say you have someone that's really, it's like, I'm not going, you can't make me go,
Yeah.
how you guys have addressed that? Cause we've never faced that,
Not yet. I remember being in those shoes though, which I don't want to go.
It's so funny because I think this is a dad problem, honestly, right? That we are the priests of our home, we're the spiritual heads of our home. And I don't even know why that's even up for discussion, to be quite honest, right?
Yeah.
Like there's things we do in our house, it's Joshua 24:15, right? As for me and my house, we're
That's
going
what
to
I always heard. Yep.
Yeah.
It was never a choice to go to mass or not. Daily mass was a choice, but the Sunday mass, not a choice.
Yeah, you think like, no, we're going to go worship God. And so I think it depends on the stages. I think it depends on the kid. Again, this is why we get back to the whip into shape, right? What's at the core of this, right? Is there something going on? Maybe, maybe they have maybe they're struggling with their own self-image, right? And they don't like to be out, whatever it is, who knows? We don't know. And I think, again, going back to understanding our children and having a relationship with them so we can bear some of those intimate things and work through them. But as far as like even just going to mass, it just blows my mind, because I think a lot of parents will ask us that, right? And so it's like, to be honest, it was like not even, it's an exclamation point. It's not a question mark. You're like, go to mass, question mark. No, it's like, you're going to mass, exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to be consistent. This is not a choice. So you can go, if you want to go like that with, your PJs on, right? And you can go on and I drag you over there. I mean, we wouldn't do that anyway, but I think it's about it's a dad problem. Like we have to be the authority in our home, right? And you can do that firmly, but lovingly and let your kids know. And I think because kids, they're going to test the boundaries. They're going to push the limits. And the minute that you bend and compromise and the things that you say are the most important, then they know they got you, right? They know they have you every single time. So I would just say, you have to, again, going back to the P in parenting, be a parent. This is not up for discussion, right? And you have to be
Hold firm
in that. And if you, and of course, husband and wife have to be united in that. But I would say this is actually a dad problem to fix. Not to say, do it because I told you to, in that way. But it's like, this is not, we go to give God worship. We keep the Lord's Day holy, right? And this is part of our giving to God what is due to God as far as true justice. So you can kind of avoid that if you're spending the time each and every day. I think, Emery, you're talking about this, right? Those little moments, or even Nicole was talking about that, is it may not even be fruitful, but trust me, you're building up to that Sunday worship. Right. So if every day we're integrating and we see God and faith and family life completely integrated, then it's not so foreign that on Sunday we go to mass.
Right.
I think where the kids will struggle, to be quite honest, is when we go back to that witness where they see the duplicity and the incongruency in our lives, to where Monday through Saturday, God's not even relevant. And then now you're going to tell me to go to mass on Sunday. You're gonna wake me up early because we got to go to 8 o'clock mass because mom wants us to go, but dad's really not living the life, right? And I think those are the struggles. But so I can get on a little tangent on that one. But I'm saying husbands, fathers need to be the spiritual heads of their home. They need to be the priests of their homes, and it should not be a topic of debate.
John, what would you say to those fathers that are like, I'm not going to do that. Why do I need to be the leader of my house in the faith? I don't even care about the faith.
Well, I would say God respects your free will, but when you stood before God and before the church and before all the faithful that were there, when you took your vows and you assumed that role, you place yourself under the authority of God in the vocation and the sacrament of holy matrimony, right? The minute that you decide to not follow God's law and calling and all the responsibilities that go along with it, you've now placed yourself under essentially two other persons of authority. One, the evil one, and two, yourself. Right. So now you just supplanted God with yourself. And I would say, think about it for a second. Right. What is your greatest wish and what is your greatest fear for your children? And most people will talk about Harvard rather than heaven. Right. They would talk about the things of this world, not the things of, the eternal life. And I would say there's consequences to that choice. And the greatest gift you can give to your children as a married couple, outside of a holy marriage and a happy marriage, is faith. And to be quite honest, the men there, studies will show, there's that one, I think it was a Swiss study that shows, right, when the husband is leading the family in the faith, if he's living out his priesthood as priest of his home, the likelihood of your children having any faith at all in adolescence or young adulthood is in excess of 65% and plus. Whereas if the wife is a spiritual leader of the home, it's like 2%, right? So just because the roles are flipped. And so the wife in all of her earnest effort to get the children to go to mass or to learn the prayers, that's sticking with them beyond their adolescence and their young adulthood is almost a futile effort, because it's not going to happen because of the roles that we play. So God designed us for very specific reasons in a very specific way. And so I would just challenge the men out there, like if you have that free will choice, but all you're doing is putting down your cross and placing it on your children, because they will have to pay for that decision that you made. And so I just challenge you. Don't get so puffed up about it, right? Like you can get really prideful, be like, I'm not doing it because John told me to do it. And it's just like, You don't have to worry about me. You'll answer to Jesus Christ at the end of your life, right? John's not going to be there. But it's like, don't get so puffed up about it, and realize the role and responsibility that you actually signed up for.
Well, I think part of our vocation is to get our kids to heaven, get each other to heaven, and get our children to heaven. And, this in terms of these stats, right? So I thought, yeah, those stats, that's for those people. That doesn't apply to us. So one day I'm driving, again, this is my time with my boys, right? They're adults now. And there was some sort of conversation with regards to having one of his, my son's friends, schoolmates, whether he's practicing his faith. And, unfortunately he's not, neither is dad. And so then I said, well, if dad wasn't practicing the faith, you would still practice, right? It was like crickets. And I'm like,
wow.
Right, you guys? And so then Meeks in the back says, no, Mom, probably not. And what? And so I looked at, Keone, and I said, son, you know how important the faith is to me. You want to be practicing? He says, Mom, I'd like to tell you yes. But if I'm honest, we look up to our dad. Our dad's our role model. And I thought,
wow.
So it's so true. So that, in humility, it's important. The fathers are important. But I would say as a mother and as a wife, our prayers are so efficacious. And it's the consistency to always continue to pray, no matter what. Again, going back, and I was just going to say, John talked about when I said, you encounter your children and you give that emotional support and you be there and be present, even though it may not seem fruitful. It's not fruitful, maybe perhaps in the moment, but you'll see the fruit as long as you're consistent, to make sure that you're consistent. Same thing with the prayers. As long as you're consistent, you'll see the fruit. And sometimes it requires not only prayers, but fasting, so I did a lot of praying and a lot of fasting.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's a beautiful witness. That's amazing. Yeah.
I asked this question because people comment and they're like, oh, I wish my husband practiced the faith. This is specifically why we're addressing this. Yeah. But, say you've heard all that we've just said and you're like, I don't even believe in God, whatever. If you love your wife, you will do this, because just like what we've been leading to is like, maybe you're not doing it out of the love of God, but you're doing it out of the love of your wife, because your wife loves God, and her, like, seeing her family be destroyed in the faith is going to break her heart, so your heart should break for what her heart breaks for.
That's such a good point, because I think if you look at the true love is willing the good of the other as other, right? So we think about that, and we're third order Dominican, so I'd always bring up St. Thomas Aquinas, right? Then when you think about our will loves in two specific ways, either the will of the concupiscence for self, right, or will of benevolence, friendship. The true object we know of God or of love is God, but in this case, as you just pointed out, Ray, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your wife and your children at the very least. Right. So if you can't, and if not, then you have to face the man in the mirror, because that's all you're concerned about is really the person in front of you when you look in that mirror. And I think that's the harsh reality, right? Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Right? You can make whatever excuse you want. You can talk about God this, and I don't believe that. But in the end, you're choosing yourself over other and over God all day long. And I think that's a great point.
And you're
Ray.
not going to be happy.
You'll never know. It's not gonna, it's gonna be short-lived, and you're gonna find yourself even more empty and longing, because you're trying to fill a God-sized hole in your heart with worldly things, with your own pride, with your own, and it's just of your own volition, of your own will. It just doesn't make any sense. And so, and trust me, I'm speaking from personal experience, right? One of the things that I think we would, when we bring credentials, right, to this, even to this interview, is Nichole and I know what marriage and family life is outside of the church, and we know what marriage and family life is inside of the church. So we've been there, done that, right? Nichole's a convert, I'm a revert. So we've been there, done that, and thought, I don't need God. I don't need this. I'm going to do this on my own. I've got credentials and degrees and a couple masters here and this, and that. And it didn't solve our problems, right? And it was just because it was God that we were truly longing for. And it was God at the center that we needed in order for us to sustain our marriage and then ultimately bear fruit in our family life.
That is beautiful. Wow.
It is.
Oh my God.
Question that I have is, what advice would you give to someone who wants that? Like, what's the first step they could make? Yeah.
You want to go first?
You can go first.
I mean, if they really want that, I mean, you have to really, so for me in my own personal journey, I had to decide for myself, where's God in all of this? Right? Where's God for me? If you can't answer that for yourself, we all hear that, right? You can't give what you don't have. And so I had to ask, well, who is Jesus to me? And who is God to me? And who is and what is my Catholic faith to me? Do I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? He's the second person of the Holy Trinity? Yes. Do I believe that this is the church that he started? Yes. Well, then what are you willing to do about it? Right. And I think that's the part where we have to have an honest, real discussion with ourselves. We both serve in marriage preparation for our parish. And one of the questions we ask, the couples there, and we just had a recent cohort go through, and we're just like, well, do you want a marriage that's long lasting, or are you here to get a divorce? And then they'll kind of scoff at you, right? Like, that's stupid. Why would we want to get divorced? I'm like, well, what are you willing to do to ensure that never happens? Right? Because you have to work every single day at your marriage, at your relationship, at your, how are you supporting and loving your wife? How are you interacting and supporting and loving your kids? It's easy to work 15 hours a day. It's more difficult to come in and have a conversation with your wife and your children and to raise them and to teach them virtues when they're being resistant or they're coming off rebellious. And so I would say, well, where is God in all of this for you? Right? Where is the faith in your life for you? And is it a part of your life? Or are you asking your kids to do something that you yourself don't even live or believe in? Because that's a difficult part, right? Is saying, do this, but I don't really live it or believe it. And I think that's why that witness was so important, and that whip your kids into shape. So just, where's God in it all for you? If you really want a holy marriage and a happy marriage, what are you willing to do about it? It's hard. It's difficult.
It is hard. Yeah.
I'd say
yeah, go ahead.
Is it the question to foster a relationship with Christ? I think to foster a relationship with Christ, the things that we could do is probably, it depends on our love language. So I don't know if you're familiar with the love languages.
Yes.
Oh yeah, they're amazing.
Okay. So for me, it's quality time. So I'd say that the way that I fell in love with Jesus is through Eucharistic adoration, spending time with him. And so it was beautiful to get that spiritual radiation. I'd say probably is the most important thing ever in terms of the grace that I needed, just in terms of being a wife and a mother and doing that well. And in terms of my career choice as well, and just serving the Lord. But, some people it's active service, or so perhaps it's just getting into some sort of ministry and serving. There's, what's another one? We talked about quality time.
Words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation. In terms of words and things, how do I affirm someone I don't know? It's really getting to know that person through scripture. So learning about the faith. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's first step to knowledge is knowing yourself, right? Once you know yourself and your love language, and then you can try to foster a relationship closer to Christ by using that.
Yeah, I think you just answered the question, though. It's funny. In order for you to foster a happy and holy marriage, you need to foster a relationship with Christ first. I mean, this is, I think about Venerable Archbishop Sheen's book, 3 to Get Married, right? If God isn't at the center of your marriage, good luck. Because this is why we know that it's a sacrament, right? The grace is required in order to live out this vocation. So fostering a happy and holy marriage actually is predicated and dependent upon your ability to foster a relationship with Christ, most specifically through the sacraments. And I think Nichole said it, the game changer is the Eucharist. It's the source and summit of our faith. If you're not spending time with our Lord, how do you think you're going to be the best husband and father that you're called to be, or wife and mother as you're called to be?
So John and Nichole, we've talked about many great things so far, but I want to ask you, what should you not do as a parent? What are things to not do that will really impact your kids in a negative way?
One of the things that stands out to me, there's a couple of things that I want to touch upon, but one is to make sure that what we're saying and what we're doing is congruent. So if I say that Mass is important or something is important, and yet I'm not following through or showing that in my actions, then there's an incongruency and the kids are not likely to follow. If I say it's important and my actions follow up that to suggest that, then that's something obviously we want to do. The other thing I want to touch on is similar in that it's my voice and my tone that I share with my kids. So John kind of alluded to it earlier when he said, we're going to Mass. It's not a question mark, it's an exclamation mark. So it's my tone. If I'm serious about something that I care about, you're going to hear it in my tone. And it's important for me to share that. The other thing too is that I don't want to come down like I'm, like angry about it. It's like, oh, gosh, Mom, is that how I'm going to be if I go to Mass? Because I see you go to daily Mass and you look angry right now. So it's again, it's sharing that there's something beautiful there that you don't want to miss. I'm not going to be angry about that. I'm going to be excited about that. And even if they're resisting, I would say the other third thing I like to share is don't expect it's going to be easy. The evil one has a target on families, and we have to go in battle ready for this. We have to be prepared and almost expect it. If your daughter comes down and she's got her dress on, she's ready for Mass, know that you're going to go upstairs and find one of the boys who's, resistant and not, you want to put his socks on or something. These are things that we're going to encounter, and we have to be prepared. So in that, know that you're going to prepare, or I guess face difficulty. And then in your tone, come on, we're excited about going. Jesus has something important to say. Let's go hear him out. Something like that, I would say, are just matching our demeanor, our tone, our facial expressions, all of that needs to match what we're saying, what we're trying to convey to our children.
Yeah, I'd say the things I would add to that is just, again, explaining the why. So I think the things not to do is to just wag the finger and just say, do it because I said so. And so using and wielding our authoritative power as parents to just make your kids do things rather than kind of bring them along the way and accompanying them along the way. And I would say the thing not to do is not approach things half-heartedly, in the sense of, like, I think Nichole covered it really well. Like, if the kids see that the faith is active in your life, that it's approving, like, and the kids will probably say, like, I'm super hot tempered. I got a lot of stuff going on, baggage and trauma that I've been through in my life. They're like, if they see Dad is a changed person, like, wow, He's more humble. He's more patient. They see and then lead, right? So the not thing to do is like expect your kids to go to confession and you don't. Expect your kids to reverence a mass, or if they're going to showing up to church and not dressed because you're sitting there wearing shorts and flip flops. What do you expect? So don't model the behavior that you don't want to see, because then the kids will just see, right? Kids are smart. They see, yeah, right. We're Catholic by name only. Right. Because they see it like, yeah, right. Because I've had the kids call me out when I was early on and be like, oh, when I lost my temper and I yelled at them because I came in from the house. Well, how was adoration? Right. Like, you just came home from adoration and you're yelling at me because of my shoes on the floor, rather than gently and lovingly, but firmly parenting them. So I don't know if I can add anything to what Nichole said. I think it was well said. And, just be a solid witness, lead your kids in the faith. And try not to show any duplicity. And that doesn't mean you won't fall. Just own it when you do. And so it doesn't mean you got to be perfect at your practice. It just means that when you do fall, you own it, you ask for pardon, and then you move on and try to make better of it.
That is awesome. Well, you guys, it's just been such a blast to have this couple time together. And I hope all of you that are watching have enjoyed this and have been taking notes. Because there are definitely big sick notes on. I'm like sitting here like, man, I should have a notepad out, But we're
good thing this is being recorded.
I know. But it's really cool because we're a little bit younger. So John could actually be my dad, which is pretty cool, But it's cool to see like our father, like how it's really amazing, like the church, because we have each other, and I can learn from you, and then. And you guys can learn from him and us, and like the questions that it's just amazing. So God has such an amazing plan, and I'm so grateful to have met you guys and to be sharing this with others. Anything else you guys want to close out saying?
No, I would just say thank you. It was an honor and a pleasure to hang with you guys, and hopefully we imparted some kind of wisdom that you can learn from. And I think the answer to all of the problems in this world are happy and holy families. And so the domestic church is the answer. And so thank you all for trying to live, for you, Ray and Anne-Marie, try to live just a sacramental marriage, right? Let's be a beacon of light to this such darkened world. And we do that by focusing on marriage and the family. So thank you for what you're trying to do. And it was fun. Looking forward to the next time.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I hope you all have a blessed day, and God love you.